Hey there, Empowered Tribe. It's Angela T. Moore. You're getting ready to experience the next episode of Empowered, a health and wellness podcast where I share my personal journey of health and healing, tips for mental and physical health, interviews with health and wellness experts and those bold enough and vulnerable enough to share their own journeys to empower you to succeed in yours. We know that life can be rewarding. It can also be challenging. It has its ups and downs, highs and lows. I learned that with a strong mind and a fit body, you are better able to grow through and grow from whatever life throws your way. My goal is to share journeys of health and wellness, as well as tips and information from extraordinary people all around the world to help you live an empowered life. My guest, Margie Martin, serves as the Grief Support Services Manager and Community Liaison for Arbor Hospice, providing support and guidance to individuals who are healing from significant loss. Margie makes it her mission to offer high-quality, compassionate care to patients and families during a difficult time. She has a deep understanding of the complex role caregivers have as they care for their loved ones at end of life. According to the Pew Research Center, roughly 1 in 4 American adults are in the sandwich generation. The sandwich generation are a unique set of individuals that find themselves sandwiched in between raising their children and caring for aging parents. However, as Margie and I discussed in this episode, caregivers also have to take care of themselves and seek support whenever needed. Margie shares some key and simple ways to prioritize self-care each and every day. By prioritizing their own health, caregivers can more effectively provide care for their loved ones. I hope you enjoy the episode. Margie, according to the Pew Research Center, roughly 1 in 4 American adults are in the sandwich generation. What is the sandwich generation? I've heard that term before. I'm a little bit familiar with it as a therapist, but for those that may not be familiar with that term, what is sandwich generation and who are the members of that very special group?
Yeah, sometimes when we refer to sandwich, we get a little hungry, but this is more just understanding what happens in families as they grow and age. So to explain what the sandwich generation is, you're in between caregiving. Usually it's parents caring for parents. So you've got mom and dad maybe to care for and your children. So you're kind of caught in the middle, oftentimes burning the candle at both ends. And it is something I think being aware of and knowing more about can kind of break down those barriers of, that isolation that can sometimes happen when you get overwhelmed, right? Because our sandwich generation tends to be, just very overwhelmed and very busy with caregiving,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, I do know that people are living longer, and the sandwich generation term is not a term that I have heard throughout my life. I mean, I am a licensed therapist. I have been working in the field of mental health for many, many years. I am a college-educated individual. You and I were talking about the fact that we both attended the same school, and so we're celebrating the fact that we're alumni of the same school. But yet, that's not a term that I have heard. I would say I probably have heard that term maybe in the last 15 years or so.
Sure.
Is the sandwich generation something that was created because of the fact that people are living longer, so they're finding themselves caring for their elderly parents as well as having children? Or did the dynamic of the family unit change in such a way that that term had to be created? What changed, or maybe was it not acknowledged?
Yeah,
that situation is.
Yeah, I think that it's something that has come out. It's not a term that I heard as a kid either. My mother used that term, but I do think it's more, I think you probably have hit a correct assumption, and that is our medical system is improved. So people do live longer. And so I think there is a lot more of us caring for aging generation, but also the dynamic of think about when, a generation ago, they may not have been working, right? So the other dynamic of sandwich generation is it's often you're working alongside being a caregiver. So there's a lot of pressure to, meet a lot of needs of those that your loved ones, right? But also the needs of your employer. So, I think that caregiving, when you don't have a career in there, I don't want to say that it's not just as challenging. I do think it's just as challenging, but I think that term did come up because of living longer and more caregivers are, both husband and wife are working. So
one of the things that I've definitely recognized is that we all have many different challenges in our life, and that when you understand that the challenges in your life are too much for you to bear, those challenges can be a lot easier to deal with if you know what organizations are out there to support you, what friends and family are out there to support you, so that you don't try to overcome those challenges by yourself. Yeah. And so one of the things that I really want to make sure we focus on today is not only providing some information, some knowledge, some wisdom, but also as it relates to what the sandwich generation is. But I want to definitely make sure that we provide them with some tools, some methods to, to kind of better navigate through this process that we're talking about. So I want to ask you specifically about Hospice of Michigan. What resources are available for those individuals that find themselves in the sandwich generation? And then after that, what I would like you to do is I really want to spend some time talking about what are some proactive ways that we can help individuals kind of lighten the load of taking care of their children, lighten the load of taking care of their elderly parents or elderly loved one.
Yes, I'll start with hospice care. Obviously, if your parent is facing a terminal illness, say you've gone to the doctor and the diagnosis is a grave one, it is kind of sent the family kind of spinning, what do we do? How do we move forward? And that is where, when you receive that terminal illness, it's life-changing, right? And it's a point of really kind of making a decision, do we want to continue with, treatments and going in that path, or do we want to, choose a path of caring and compassion, and a path that kind of says, I think I'm done with treatment for now. I think that right now I just want to focus on my goodbyes and my family, right? Mm-hmm. This is a discussion we have with our patients, but it's also a discussion often that has their children involved. They're often sitting there as we have these conversations and we talk about what we can provide end of life. I can share that hospice does provide, a more holistic approach, where we have a physician staff. We also have nurses, social work, spiritual care, music therapists, massage therapists. We have volunteers who help. It's just a whole team of people coming together to help your loved one and to help you. So one of the things we often talk about is hospice care is not just for the patient, it's for the family, right? And so while we are taking most of our instruction from the patient, but there's sometimes when they're no longer able to do that. So we are talking to usually their power of attorney, which is usually one of their children or a spouse maybe. But so yes, there is that additional support. You don't have to be facing this end of life, end of days, all on your own. You can reach out and get that type of support. The other piece, and what my role is aftercare. So I think that the other thing in making decisions for hospice care is to realize that your loved one, which might be your child, will be provided 13 months of follow-up and grief support. And you can avail yourself to whatever that might look like. If that is, you want to come to one of our support groups. We have a walking group, maybe you want to get out and, sometimes caregiving can create an isolation. And so sometimes it's like a wonderfully welcoming opportunity to be with others who also are grieving, but to get out of the house, right, and to get walking. We also have, individual, if they would want to talk with someone and kind of process what, because there's a lot that happens as a death approaches. And then, there's family dynamics, there's the feelings of loss, the feelings of change, right? Ultimately, the huge change that's happened. So having someone to sometimes process that with and to talk with, helps in the journey, right? Mm-hmm. So it's another piece of what we provide.
You mentioned a lot of things that I would say in previous conversations that I've had with hospice. Something that I've definitely appreciated is the fact, this kind of holistic approach of looking at the person as a whole. Something that I would say I think is an unfortunate thing that happens is that once someone is at a certain stage of life, perhaps they've received a diagnosis, perhaps they're coming to the end of life, there is a tendency, unfortunately, I think, to only think about that and to forget that the person still wants to have good times and still, and still wants to do, fun things, and they're not their illness, they're not their disease, they're not this stage that they're in. Yeah. So I'm so glad that you mentioned all the different ways that you're catering to the individual, but also to the people. I think being mindful of the people that are connected to that individual and understanding they need support too. Yeah. And I think maybe even in that support, helping them understand that family member that is coming to the end of their life or whatever stage that they're in, that they're not just that they still like to have conversations, like to have fun, like to feel good, Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah. And some of the really wonderful moments that we have with patients is often just like that. We're smiling, we're laughing, reminiscing, we're living, allowing them to live to the very last moment, mm-hmm. And that's something that we really do encourage. That you're right. It's sometimes, there's a misconception with hospice is that this is the end. And the reality is not always. Sometimes we have patients for 6, 9 months to a year. And they are able to receive these wonderful services. And of course, we feel enriched by knowing them, right? And getting to know these folks. But also, you had talked about kind of ways that we can help caregivers, right?
Yeah.
Beyond just hospice care, say your loved one isn't ready for hospice care, but what can I do for me as a caregiver? We often, if you've ever been in an airplane and they are kind of going through all the instructions, that when they say that the oxygen drops, what are you supposed to do?
Put it on yourself first.
So that's the thing, that mentality of you got to take care of yourself, and in taking care of yourself, you'll provide better care to those around you, your children, your parents, and it's a win for everybody if you do some good self-care. And so, I want to talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I think is important in the sandwich generation is to open communication, family communications. I think sometimes the primary caregiver gets this idea that they're the only person who can care for mom or dad. If you could kind of think to yourself, what can like if you've got siblings or extended family, what could they do to help? What can I do to lighten the burden? Let's talk as a family about what caregiving looks like. What are their needs? Maybe it's the brother is out of town and is unable to visit, but maybe he can offer someone to help clean the house, right? That lifts a little bit of the burden up for the caregiver. Maybe it's the caregiver has always been part of, let's say they play pickleball on Thursday. That's kind of a new thing. If they want to go to that, release and to go to play on their pickleball, that they could ask, maybe it's your mother had a very, very close friend. You could reach out and communicate with those, that whole group too, to say, hey, do you mind maybe coming to visit mom so that I can go out and get some exercise. So I think sometimes it's not within our comfort level, right? I think our society often says you got to do it yourself, and no one's going to do it like you, right? But we got to change that language that I need to reach out to my community, whether it be family or beyond. And it's okay to ask for help. Mm-hmm. That's a real hard one for us, isn't it? As caregivers, it's really, really hard to do that. But that's a first step. And then finding, once you've had some of that communication and find a way to free up the schedule, if you will. And sometimes it can be down, like when we talk about sandwich generation, it might be taking the kids to karate, right? It might be those communications might be the other way around. You can all together as a family or community, provide the best care, right? And sometimes that's, it can be as simple as carpooling, right? Mm-hmm. Asking somebody where 2 days a week, you don't have to drive the kids. Wow. And then your friend doesn't have to drive them 2 other days because you made this wonderful arrangement. So yeah, think about ways, in concrete ways you can ask for help. And that's an initial way of, asking for help is initial way. And then that communication. And then, think of ways, when we talk about self-care, what does that look like for mm-hmm. you? I often ask my clients sometimes, what do you do for self-care? And I get this long pause mm-hmm. and maybe crickets. It's like, that's not even a language that they've even thought of. And so I say, what, when you think of somebody else and they're getting self-care, what does that look like? And sometimes people throw out these grandiose, like they went to the spa for the day or they went on vacation for a week. And sometimes self-care is that, mm-hmm. right? But sometimes it can be something small and we forget that. Maybe taking a moment and just walking down to the mailbox. And when you're walking down to the mailbox, you're noticing the nature around you, the grass below you, the trees above you, the birds that might be singing, take a moment to acknowledge and to be in nature for just even a minute. Self-care can be small. Self-care can be taking a moment and saying, I just need to step away, in finding a quiet spot in the house, and then do some deep breathing. You close your eyes for a moment and just center. And then you can come back to what might be in front of you, right? What you need to make decisions about or what you have to take care of. But we need little moments of self-care. They don't have to be grandiose. They can be small things, but be intentional. Mm-hmm. Be thoughtful about what that is. And make time for that. Make time for yourself.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Ironically, as in my business, I would say I really pride myself on teaching people how to integrate healthy lifestyle strategies throughout their busy day. And self-care, of course, is a major part of that. And I do find that people think, as it relates to self-care, it has to be something grand. It has to be something very significant. And self-care can be integrated into your day in so many different ways. And I'm glad that you kind of broke it down into those little small, I think, I would say small ways, like giving people some suggestions, like you said, just walking to the mailbox and just taking in nature, taking a deep breath. Those are things that are very doable. But I think also, too, if you decide, okay, this is necessary for me, so that I can care best for my elderly mom, my elderly father, but also for my children. I think once you make that decision and make that commitment that you're going to do that for yourself, I think you would find ways to integrate even some small things and maybe some larger things. It may not be a trip to the spa for the whole entire day. It may be a week vacation, but moments to exercise. You mentioned going to play pickleball by having someone come over and sit with your mom while you go play pickleball. Being able to run errands even without having the kids or without having your loved one, having a neighbor come by and sit and so that I can just go to the store by myself. Things like that. I think it's just understanding that I always say self-care is caring for the self. And when you say it that way, you realize that it's not an option. you know?
Right.
Because of course you have to care for yourself, because how can you care for your children or anyone if you're not caring for yourself? Yeah. Any other thoughts, any other suggestions for someone who finds themselves, a member of the sandwich generation? Any other suggestions that you have as ways that they can kind of alleviate the stress and make it easier for themselves? Any other thoughts?
But I think just circling back to that, the self-care and, just those points of communication, involve family, involve people who care about you, right? And, and also I think, we can get caught up, right, in the busyness of everything. We can get caught up in the to-dos that we forget to sometimes to be. And what we treasure often so much and the people that we love is being with them. But if we aren't doing the right things towards self-care, we just find ourselves doing, right? And we're not capturing those moments when the kids, when they first ride their bike or, without assistance, those moments, we need to soak in those moments too, that we, that it's so easy, I think, especially in the sandwich generation, to be caught in this place of, I gotta be doing something. I gotta take care of this or that, or, the other thing. And that we sometimes forget to be with our parents who have wisdom and lessons and, just, beautiful lives that we could, just soak in being with them. Children, they're growing, they're discovering, they're exploring, we want to make sure to be present to them too. So that's, if I think there's just working with people in the way that we do, I know that there are people out there who might be listening who, yes, but my story is different, or yes, but my situation is different. And that can be a barrier too, yes, buts are, they're abundant sometimes because yes, every situation is unique, right? But what we're getting at here is that you are important and you have value, and taking care of you means a lot. And so it means a lot to the relationships that you have with your parents and your children. And so, just imploring people to consider that, consider taking pause to, how can I better take care of myself so I can better take care of my family?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, as you were talking, Margie, it made me think about a number of things. I think about when my kids were little, and sometimes I would be so busy cleaning up the toys that I would forget, but you could be sitting down on the floor and playing with the toys with the kids. And I had to stop myself. And I got very good at that, of recognizing that it's not important to clean up the toys. It's important to play with the kids with the toys on the floor and have fun. It's important to, when your husband walks in, because I spent when my kids were little, I had the fortune of being able to stay at home with them when they were little, and I actually did go back to school once they started going back to school. And so I did have that opportunity to play with them, to dig up worms and frogs and get dirty and have a ball. But I have to tell you, Margie, it took me a while to get there, because I caught myself. I was just cleaning and trying to make sure everything was straight. And then when my husband was coming home, I was so busy trying to, run around and make sure everything was a certain way for him that I wasn't even talking to him. And I was like, stop. And I was so glad that I realized that early in motherhood. Yeah. And I realized that early in my marriage, which is probably why I have these, very healthy, well-adjusted kids, and why I have a relationship with the same man. We've been together for 35 years, because I realized that. But what you would remind me of when you were saying about human, people say we're human beings, not human doings. And I think, we forget that. We forget that we're not supposed to always be doing. And one thing I want to highlight, and this is kind of connect to something that you said earlier when you were talking about that you don't have to do it all by yourself. One of the things that, and I'm sure you've given your clients the same advice, is I've told them it's really important to talk with your siblings or different people that that can provide you support, and ask them, well, what do they feel like they can help you with? What do they feel like they're good at? Because you may have someone in the family that's a great organizer, and they're very good with making phone calls and keeping things very organized. You may have someone that is, very good for running errands. I mean, there's so many different things. Identifying, who and what those people are within those family units can really help, because sometimes we ask certain people to do certain things that they're not good at or that they hate. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
I think that's a very good point. And you've been candid about your life. I am living the sandwich generation. My mother lives with us. She is 85 years old, and I have 3 teenage children. And so we've been in this joint living arrangement for 10 years. So my kids have grown up in this atmosphere. And I will say, I'm not just talking the talk, that I have lived, and I have siblings that I reach out to, and they will sometimes, if I can't get mom to the doctor's appointment, they're helping out. So yeah, I think that it is. And I think that, like, as you were saying, I think that's a very good point of making sure it's something that they want to do. I really think that my sister is just very detail oriented, and she's very good at reporting back what the doctor says and what the doctor, we should do for mom. And, so that's wonderful. And that's because she lives with me. It's things that I'm checking in with her, how can we best help you carry out what the doctor wishes for you to help you, have the best health that you can have. At she's doing really well.
Now, you mentioned you have teenage kids. So how have your kids been influenced by having your mom in your home? How do you think your kids have been influenced by this experience?
It's been a positive experience. I mean, I think there's been challenges along the way. I want to emphasize, she has her own apartment. So she's not got a bedroom upstairs with the kids. It's not like that. But yeah, I think it's taught them some responsibility and what it means to be part of a family. So they stop in and with grandma and check in with her and say things like, do you need your trash? I mean, I've taught them, ask her if she needs her trash taken out, and they help with her laundry now. And so, yeah, it's taught them some responsibility beyond themselves, and that how you, as a family, you take care of each other. But at the same time, I just caught my daughter the other day telling a story my mother always told. So it's just so cute how the generational, that she's so proud of her grandma, and that my has had her feisty moments. And I think my daughter loves that, that, my mother speaks up for what she believes, my grandmother speaks up for what she believes in, and has stood for what she believes in many remarkable ways. And I think that my kids are very proud of that.
I love that. I do think that it's an important thing to have a relationship with your grandparents if you can. Love family units that are connected in that way. I think the younger generation definitely benefits by the experiences of the older generation. And I love when they have many opportunities to engage like that. Yeah. Because I think sometimes in the busyness of life, a lot of those family traditions that were so well maintained before, I grew up, and it was always, after church, you go to grandmother's house on Sunday and you would spend the whole day there. And it was like every Sunday. And yeah.
Yeah.
Huh?
I said, what a beautiful tradition that you have.
And, and sadly, when she passed, that tradition pretty much stopped. And and then here, unfortunately, my mom died when I was 13. So my kids haven't had that relationship, with their grandmother. And they do have a relationship with my husband's mother, and that's been nice. But I would have loved them to have been able to, to know my mom and to have that tradition. I wish I could cook like my grandmother.
When you lose, when we're talking about grief and loss, when you lose your mother at such a young age, there's grief all along the way, right? It may not be as raw as it is in that first few years, but with every milestone and with every, I'm sure even just this conversation, moments where it triggers for you that that's a grief. Gee, I wish that my kids had that kind of relationship with my mom, because they will, right? That kind of thing.
So I'm so glad that your families, that your kids are able to experience your mom. What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful gift. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. To speak on the grief piece is that we talk about Grandpa all the time. So it's, my youngest never knew him. She was born 3 weeks after he passed away. And it's so sweet that she feels like she knows him through the memories that we've shared through the years, and that she has some of the gifts that Grandpa had, and how beautiful it is, generationally to tell, to have those connections with our ancestors, even though we might not have met them, right?
Yeah. You make me think about my Uncle June. I used to call my Uncle Junebug, because my uncle was this amazing individual, and you'll see why I brought this up, because we had to bring hospice, because after my mom died, I moved with my uncle, and then my uncle ended up getting brain and lung cancer, and hospice was a significant part of his care, like at the end. But I tell my kids all the time, both my boys are very good at mechanics and just very good at fixing anything. And my Uncle June was like that. I mean, that man could fix anything, could build anything. And my kids are like that. They did not get that from me, Margie, and they did not get that from my husband. So I tell them all the time, you got that from Uncle June. They've never met Uncle June, don't even know what Uncle June looks like.
But they have a gift for mechanics that it has been passed down through the family. Yeah.
Isn't that funny? I just think that's so funny. I mean, it's hilarious. Like, my kids can literally build anything, repair anything. I have no idea where they got that from, because bless my husband's heart, he is so good at a lot of other things, but not when it comes to that.
Well, we all have our own.
Yes, we do. So, being mindful of time, and I know that you have a very busy day, I want to give you the opportunity, though, to talk about how Hospice of Michigan and so let me ask you this. So there's Hospice of Michigan, and then you are actually a member of, now, do you work specifically for, was it Arbor?
I work for Arbor Hospice, but I work very closely with Hospice of Michigan. So we are part of the North Star Care community. And what's under that umbrella is our palliative care, our Hospice of Michigan, and Arbor Hospice, and our Anchors program, and there's several other entities, but we work very closely with Hospice of Michigan. And so, but are you going to ask kind of where people can go to?
Resources and things like that, and to learn, where can they get support?
Absolutely. So please, if you have questions about either hospice care or grief and loss, aftercare, please don't hesitate to visit our websites. You can either visit www.arborhospice.org, or you can visit www.hom.org. Both will have, resource pages for, even answering maybe some of the questions you might have if your loved one is ready for hospice. If ever in doubt, you can always call our, phone number is listed on that website, and you can call and ask questions. We have nurses that are able to kind of talk you through whether your loved one is appropriate for hospice care. But also you can look at our website for resources for grief and loss. So we have, our programs. We have our traditional grief groups. We have groups that are virtual. If you feel like it would be helpful to, some of us live busy lives, especially caregivers. So it's to go to a location for a group. So, we have that virtual option. And then we have a lot of in-person programming too. So I mentioned the walking group. We have, for our loss of spouse, we have meal groups. And then we have a traditional, what we call living on support group that meets monthly. And so, there's a lot of different programs, but we also have online options. Like, I have some people who, who find it helpful to have that encouragement. So we have like what we call the notes of hope. So you can sign up and get weekly affirmations, kind of normalizing what you might be feeling in grief. And that's kind of there's less commitment to that, right? But it's, it's that self-care. It's like that email, and it kind of centers you and normalizes, okay, I'm not alone in what I'm feeling when it comes to my grief. And then we have some self-care videos that our massage and music therapists put together. So those are wonderful to view and to kind of, they're another way of taking a breath and pause, right? And good self-care. So
okay. That is so awesome. I just love that. As I mentioned, earlier in our interview today, how important it is to take a whole person approach and just to realize that, people, they're not just what they do. They're not just what happened to them. And they're not, an issue or illness. People are multidimensional. I always say there's many colors to us. And we want to nurture all the different parts of us. And I love that there's so many ways to, one, connect and get support, but also, live on and move on. And I hate to say move on, because I don't think you really move on. I think it's just, live on, you're living on. Yeah. Living forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Margie, for taking, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, the truth of the matter is that, when we talk about living on, grief travels with us. Like we spoke of that earlier in the interview. You lost your mom at 13. We revisit that, and so yes, living on is kind of that idea of that. It's not just the grief that we're moving forward from, but it's life itself, right? The change, and how do I adapt to this change? And this loss, and how do I move forward and live life? Because by and large, when you've had a very loving and nurturing relationship, they want that for you. They want you to do the healing and to move forward and embrace life again and to live it. Right?
I always say the greatest honor you can give to someone that's passed on is to live your life to the fullest. Yeah, I really believe that. I really believe that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share your knowledge, your wisdom. I always say your purpose and passion with me. And thank you so much for the work that you've done with your clients. And thank you for the many ways that you've supported. I know so many people that have turned to Hospice of Michigan and Arbor Hospice for support. I'm a true advocate and a champion for people like you. So thank you so much for the work that you do.
It is my privilege, and always is. So, and thank you Angela, for having.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Thanks for listening to Empower It with Angela T. Moore. Feel free to share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it. New episodes come out weekly. Follow our show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.